Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Nolan's cell phone rings at 6 in the morning, a time when no one usually calls unless it's some kind of emergency. He fumbled for his cell phone, and his sleepiness was instantly dispelled by the name displayed on the screen dash, Elaine Miller, his fiance's mother. Hello, Elaine. Nolan's voice held obvious concern. What happened? Sobbing came from the other end of the line, and it was only a few seconds later that Elaine's shaky voice could be heard. Nolan, I don't know how to say this. At that moment, Nolan felt a chill rise up his spine. Elaine had always been a strong woman, raising Talia on her own for 20 years, and had never been so emotionally out of control in front of him. Elaine, please tell me what happened. He sat up straight, fully awake. It's Talia. She told me last night she was calling off the wedding. Elaine's voice shattered. I don't understand. You've been together for 5 years and everything is set. How could she do this to you? Nolan felt breathless, as if someone had placed a boulder in his chest. He looked over at the calendar on his bedroom wall. Less than 3 months until their wedding. They had just sent out wedding invitations 3 months ago, on his first day back from a rig rotation. Did she say why? He tried to keep his voice steady. Elaine's sobbing was more pronounced. She said she needed time to think, but Nolan. I saw her cell phone. She paused, as if gathering her courage. A man named Reed sent her a message about. Not the kind of thing friends are supposed to have. Nolan closed his eyes and tried to calm his thumping heart. Reed, a name that has come up occasionally in Talia's conversations over the past 2 months. A businessman she knew from work was described by her as just a regular customer. Nolan, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't be looking through her cell phone, but it's sitting there with the screen lit up. I just happened to see it. Elaine continued. I can't accept her hurting you like this. You know I've always thought of you as my own son. Thanks for telling me, Elaine. Nolan responded mechanically, his thoughts drifting back to that disturbing night 6 weeks ago. Talia's friends were gathered at their house, and after a few drinks, she joked in front of everyone. If you were more handsome and richer, I'd marry you. The laughter at the time echoed in his mind, but it sounded extra harsh now. After hanging up the phone, Nolan sat on the edge of his bed and looked out the window at the lightning sky. Alberta's winter dawned late, like a truth he was only now seeing. Nolan first met Talia 5 summers ago when he had just doubled his income by obtaining a position as a senior technician on a drilling rig. His friend Drake opened a new bistro in Edmonton and invited him to the opening party pair. You're coming, man, Drake said on the phone. I know you just got back from the ocean, but you need to meet new faces, not spend all day soaking up the oil jargon-filled guys. Later that night, Nolan shows up somewhat reluctantly in front of the Rustic Crown Tavern. He has never been very comfortable with social situations, especially after 45 consecutive days at sea, and prefers to resume his normal routine in the quiet of his home. But Drake is one of his few close friends, and he can't bear to say no. The tavern was packed with people, a mix of music, laughter, and conversation. Nolan squeezed his way through the crowd to find a busy Drake at the bar. There you are. A smile bloomed on Drake's face as he moved to make a whiskey and hand it to him. Mr. Spoilsport actually showed up. Shut up. Nolan smiled and shook his head. I'll be here when I say I will. Just then, a cheerful laugh from the other end of the bar caught his attention. That's Talia. Her laugh is as clear as a bell and still stands out in the cacophony. She wore a simple white dress, her long dark brown hair swaying gently with her laughter, her amber eyes sparkling with energy. Drake noticed Nolan's gaze and raised an eyebrow. That's Talia Miller, my event planner. Without her, there wouldn't be so many people tonight. Want to get acquainted? Before Nolan could answer, Drake had beckoned Talia over. She gracefully made her way through the crowd to the bar, a smile still on her face. Talia, this is my old friend Nolan Fletcher, oil rig tech guru, just back from the North Sea. Nolan, this is Talia Miller, the genius who made my place look less bad. Nice to meet you, Nolan. Talia held out her hand, her voice warmer than Nolan expected. I've always wondered how those of you who work at sea adjust to that kind of life. Nolan held her hand and felt a wonderful electric current. Honestly, it was the first few days back on land that were the hardest part of the adjustment. So how are you settling in now? There was a curious gleam in her eyes. It's still a work in progress, he answered honestly, and may need the help of an extra glass of wine. Or one more conversation. Talia said with a smile. I happen to have a lot of questions I want to ask. For the rest of that night, they found a quiet corner to talk. Talia shows a genuine interest in his work, unlike many who are only concerned with how good the paycheck is. She asks him how he spends his downtime at sea, if the storms on the rig are as scary as they are in the movies, and what the relationships between team members are like. In turn, he learned how she grew from an events assistant to a sought-after curator, creating space for arts and cultural events in this oil city. I love connecting people from different worlds, she explains, with a twinkle of enthusiasm in her eyes. Like tonight, to see how many people from different backgrounds come together here. At the end of the evening, they exchanged phone numbers. Nolan returns home and realizes he can't wait to see her again. The feeling was foreign to him. He'd always been the type of person who preferred to be alone and rarely actively pursued relationships. But Talia is different. She has a glow about her that is impossible to ignore. The next day, he mustered up the courage to send her a message inviting her to dinner. She quickly replied in agreement, attaching a smiling emoji. And so their story begins. They met almost every day for the next 3 months whenever Nolan was on vacation in the land. He discovers that Talia has a magical ability to make him feel comfortable and willing to share himself. In front of her, he was no longer the quiet technician, but a man with a story and a passion. Their first argument occurred the night before he was due to return to the rig. Talia becomes silent, and when he asks her what's wrong, she finally speaks up. I'm afraid you'll forget me when you leave, she said softly. 45 days is a long time. Nolan took her hand. It's been a long day at sea, but the thought of coming back and seeing you will make the wait worth it. But what if we want a real future? She gazed into his eyes. How long will this pattern of life last? It was a valid question, one that he himself had pondered. The rig job gave him a good salary and stable career prospects, but it really wasn't the ideal lifestyle for the long term, especially for a serious relationship. I'm not going to do this job forever, he replied seriously. I have a savings plan, and in a couple of years I can apply for a position as a land technology consultant. Talia nodded slightly, but the worry in her eyes didn't completely dissipate. He leaned in and kissed her. I won't forget you, Talia. In fact, I think I'm falling in love with you. It was the first time he had ever said anything like that, honest and direct. Talia's eyes widened, and then she hugged him tightly. I love you too, Nolan. When he boarded the helicopter the next day, his chest was filled with more complex emotions than ever before. He looked forward to his return, but also began to think about how to build a more stable future for them. Over the next 2 years, their relationship evolved in this particular rhythm. During Nolan's time at sea, they stay in touch through video calls and messages, while he takes vacations to devote himself fully to their relationship. He took her camping in Banff National Park in the Rockies. They hiked on the Jasper Icefield and searched for whales off the coast of Vancouver Island. Each experience brought them closer together. During this time, Talia's career flourished. She moved from small event planning to event director at a high-end hotel, where she was responsible for organizing large corporate meetings and luxury weddings. Her social circle expanded, and her work schedule became more irregular, but she always tried to schedule free time on the days Nolan was back. One fall 3 years ago, Nolan returned from the rig with a special project. He bought a piece of land north of Edmonton to build their home. You can see the northern lights here in the winter, he said, holding Talia's hand as she stood in the open field. And in the summer you can see the lights of the whole city. Talia's eyes glistened with tears. Are you serious? Never been more serious, he said, taking a folded drawing out of his pocket. It's a preliminary design, but I'd like to hear what you think. Every detail can be adjusted to your liking. She took the drawing and ran her fingers gently over the lines. You've really planned the future for us. Not only the future, Nolan said as he got down on one knee and pulled out a small jewelry box, but the present. Talia Miller, will you marry me? Inside the box was a platinum ring with a sparkling diamond in the center, surrounded by small sapphires around the edges like the stars around the North Star. Talia covered her mouth and looked at the ring in shock, then Nolan's expectant eyes. Time seemed to freeze for a few seconds, then she jumped into his arms. Yes, of course I do. At that moment, Nolan felt like the happiest man in the world. He spun around with Talia in his arms, and the two of them laughed at the empty land, envisioning what was to come. After their engagement, their lives became much busier. Nolan continued his offshore work while overseeing the construction of the house. Talia was deeply involved in the design details, communicating frequently with the architects and interior team. They decided to wait until the house was finished before having the wedding, which meant about a 2-year wait, but both decided it was worth it. It was during this time that Talia's career took a major turn. Crescent Moon Hotel Group, one of Canada's most luxurious hotel brands, asked her to become the director of event planning for their Edmonton location. This is a coveted position that means a higher salary, more responsibility, and the opportunity to engage with high-end clients. She accepted without hesitation. "I'm so proud of you," he said sincerely when she excitedly told Nolan the news. "You deserve all the recognition you can get." However, the pace of Talia's life changes as she starts her new job. She often needs to work late into the night, and weekends are no exception. She met more people from the upper echelons of society and attended more high-end parties and events. While she still made as much time as she could on the days Nolan was back, he could sense something was different. "You've been quiet lately," Nolan observed during a dinner date. "Is work stressful?" Talia sighed, fiddling with her plate of food with her fork. "It's not just the stress." She raised her eyes to his. "Sometimes I feel alone." The words stabbed like a knife into Nolan's heart. "While I was away?" "Not only that," she hesitated, "but even when you're here, part of your mind is always on work. We rarely really talk anymore, you know? Not about the house or the wedding plans, but the things that really matter." Nolan felt a pang of guilt. He has indeed been busy overseeing the construction of the house, making sure everything is going according to plan, as well as preparing for the move to land-based work. He wants to give Talia the best of everything, but neglects the simplest of companionship. "I'm so sorry." He reached out and took hers. "I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect for our future. But you're right. We need more time to really be together." Talia forced a smile. "I know you're trying. It just feels like we're moving on different tracks sometimes." Since that conversation, Nolan has become more attentive to listening to Talia's thoughts and feelings. He'll arrange special dates where he doesn't discuss the house or his job and just enjoys each other's company. For a while, things seem to be back on track. Last summer, their new home was finally completed. It was a large, modern-style house with huge floor-to-ceiling windows that allowed for city views while maintaining plenty of privacy. Talia's touch is in every corner, from the marble countertops in the kitchen to the custom closet in the master bedroom. Her tastes and preferences are evident everywhere. The day they moved into their new home, they celebrated by opening a bottle of champagne. Standing in the spacious living room, watching the rays of the setting sun spilling through the windows onto the wooden floor, Nolan felt that it had all been worth the effort. "Our home," he raised his glass, "to all the memories to come." Talia clinked her glass with him, a twinkle of joy in her eyes but a hint of apprehension that Nolan didn't notice at the time. "For our home." As the wedding date approaches, their lives become more stressful. Choosing the wedding venue, designing the invitations, arranging the banquet, finalizing the guest list. Every decision requires consultation and compromise. Talia, as a professional event planner, has a high attention to detail, while Nolan favors simple and straightforward solutions. Throughout this series of decisions, they realized that their values were sometimes not in complete agreement with each other. Talia craves a big, impressive wedding. Nolan prefers an intimate and meaningful ceremony. After much discussion, they eventually reached a compromise, a small but elaborate ceremony in the rooftop garden of the Crescent Moon Hotel, followed by a larger reception in the ballroom at the same location. As time passes, Nolan notices that Talia's enthusiasm for the wedding seems to be waning. At first, she was passionate about every detail, spending hours researching floral designs and tablecloth styles. Recently, however, she has begun to postpone decisions and has shown indifference to some issues. "Are you sure this is what you want?" On a wedding cake tasting date, she asked out of the blue. Nolan stopped and looked at her. "Wedding cake? I think vanilla and raspberry go well together." "No." She shook her head, her eyes fluttering a bit. "I mean, all of it. Marriage, together forever." Nolan felt his heart skip a beat. "You're doubting our marriage?" "Not skeptical," she clarified quickly. It was a big decision that changed our lives forever. Sometimes I wonder if we're ready." He took her hand. "Talia, I love you. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you." If you need more time, we can postpone the wedding. No, no, she forced a smile. I just had a moment of panic. Ignore me. Despite her attempts to downplay it, the conversation left seeds of unease in Nolan's mind. In the weeks that followed, he paid more attention to Talia's moods and behaviors, trying to get to the root of her misgivings. 3 months ago, they finally mailed out their wedding invitations. That night, they celebrated by opening a bottle of wine at home. 3 more months, Nolan raised his glass, and we'll officially be Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher. Talia smiled and clinked glasses with him, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. 3 months. It feels surreal. Just then, her cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen and quickly placed the phone screen side down on the table. No answer. Nolan asked. It's not important. She took a sip of her drink. It's just work. But when she got up to go to the restroom, her phone lit up again. Nolan didn't mean to look, but the message notice was there, clearly visible. Same place, tomorrow, 3 p.m.? Looking forward to seeing you again. Or, Nolan felt a pang of discomfort. He doesn't bring up the message, but begins to notice subtle changes. That Talia is working late more often, that she's often distracted, that she's begun to set new passwords on her cell phone, that her social media updates have decreased. These little things may seem inconsequential individually, but cumulatively, they form a disturbing pattern. That weekend 6 weeks ago, they hosted a barbecue party at their home for a group of friends to celebrate an upcoming wedding. It was the first time Nolan had met Reed Mason, a tall, handsome man wearing well-tailored casual clothes and a valuable watch on his wrist. Talia introduced him as an important client of the hotel, an up-and-coming real estate developer. Throughout the evening, Nolan noticed Reed's gaze frequently fall on Talia, and she always seemed to sense his gaze and return a subtle smile. There is a silent communication between them, a connection that once existed between Nolan and Talia, but now seems to be fading. As the party progressed into the second half of the night, the alcohol kicked in and the atmosphere became looser. Reed is talking about how his latest luxury condo project has attracted celebrity buyers, and Talia and a couple of female friends are sitting around, oohing and awing from time to time. So, Talia, Reed said with a playful edge to his voice, if you ever get tired of the cold in this city, you're always welcome at my project in Vancouver. The view is unrivaled and it never freezes. Talia smiled. That sounds tempting. Maybe we can consider it when we get back from our honeymoon. If you marry me, I promise to take you to the tropics every winter. Reed said jokingly, but there was a certain seriousness in his eyes. The atmosphere suddenly became slightly tense. Everyone knows that Talia is about to get married to Nolan, and jokes like this seem a little out of place. But instead of an immediate retort, Talia took a sip of her drink and then looked in Nolan's direction. If you were more handsome and richer, I'd marry you, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room erupted in awkward laughter. Some have tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the damage has already been done. Nolan felt a stab of pain, but he forced himself to smile and pretend it was just a harmless joke. Before he went to bed that night, he tried to ask Talia what she meant by that statement. It was just a joke, she insisted, but avoided his eyes. You know I didn't mean it like that. Are you sure? Nolan asked softly, because lately it feels like you're a little. Alienation. Talia sighed. I'm just stressed. Work, weddings, all the details. Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe. If you want to postpone the wedding. No, it's not the wedding, she interrupted him. It's just taking some time to get in the right frame of mind. Don't worry, okay? Nolan wanted to press further, but he saw the exhaustion in Talia's eyes and decided to drop it for now. Maybe she does just get stressed out and needs space. Maybe everything will be okay. In the weeks that followed, he tried to rekindle the spark in their relationship. He arranged weekend getaways, sent her flowers, and helped with all the details of the wedding. Talia seems to appreciate the efforts, but still maintains a certain emotional distance. And then there was now, Elaine's phone call, which changed everything. Nolan stood at his bedroom window and watched the rising sun light up the distant horizon. He felt like his world was falling apart and there was nothing he could do about it. He picked up his cell phone and dialed Talia's number. The phone rang for a long time and eventually went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message, just hung up. Nolan took a deep breath and started packing. He had planned to go on a 3-day hike in the nearby Kananaskis Mountains this afternoon, and now it looked like that plan would need to change. His thoughts gradually shifted from confusion and shock to calmness and determination. If Talia really did betray him, he needs to know the whole truth. Not through Elaine's indirect information, but through her own research. He doesn't act impulsively or make decisions in anger. He will systematically gather information, analyze the facts, and then make decisions, just as he does with technical problems at work. Putting the last of his clothes into his backpack, Nolan looked around the home they had built together. There were pictures of them together in Banff National Park on the walls, souvenirs they'd bought on their vacation in Rome on the coffee table, and wine glasses in the kitchen from last night's dinner they'd shared. All of it was evidence of their life together, a commitment he had thought would last a lifetime. Now it's all shrouded in betrayal. But Nolan Fletcher is not one to give up easily. He'll find out the truth, no matter how painful it is. Then he'll decide how to fight back. Nolan left the house and drove downtown with a plan in mind. If Talia is really having an affair with Reed, he needs hard evidence, not just speculation or snippets of information. His first stop was the Crescent Moon Hotel. By 9 a.m., the hotel lobby was already busy. Nolan chose a seat that overlooked the front desk but was not too conspicuous. He ordered a cup of coffee and opened his laptop, pretending to work. Actually, he's waiting for Talia to show up. He knew she was usually in the office at 9:30, and today should be no exception. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Talia walked into the lobby. She looked professional and competent in her dark blue professional suit, with her hair carefully coiffed. Nolan couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache at her beauty. The woman he'd loved for 5 years might now belong to someone else. Talia walked straight to the employee elevator, not noticing Nolan in the corner. She looked preoccupied, a little different from her usual confident demeanor. He noticed that she kept her cell phone in her hand, checking the screen from time to time as if waiting for some news. As she disappeared behind the elevator doors, Nolan opened his phone and checked their shared calendar. Today at 3 p.m., Talia's agenda is labeled Client Meeting, with no specifics. The timing of this coincides with what was mentioned in Reed's text message. Nolan decided to take a chance. He walked towards the front desk with a friendly smile. "Good morning," he said to the receptionist. "I'm Reed Mason's partner, and we have a meeting at 3 o'clock this afternoon, but he forgot to tell me exactly where. Can you check for me?" The receptionist checks her computer. "Mr. Mason has a reservation in the penthouse dining room today at 3 p.m. It's a private dining area." "Thanks." Nolan maintained his calm expression. "That's exactly the kind of information I needed." After leaving the hotel, he drove to his most trusted friend Drake's tavern. Even though it wasn't open for business yet, he knew Drake was usually there this time of day preparing for the day's business. "Man, you look like shit," Drake said the moment he saw Nolan. "What happened?" Nolan briefly explains the situation, including Elaine's phone call and what he found at the hotel. Drake is one of the few people who fully understands his relationship with Talia and is the only one he can trust right now. "Fuck." Drake poured 2 shots of whiskey, even though it was only morning. "Are you sure? There may be other explanations." "I'm not sure." Nolan shook his head. "But there are too many coincidences." "So what are you going to do? Direct confrontation?" "No." Nolan's voice was calm and firm. "I need to know exactly what happened, the whole truth. Then we'll decide how to act." Drake thought for a moment. "What kind of help do you need?" "At 3 p.m. today, I need to confirm whether Talia actually met with Reed there and the nature of their relationship." "Let me help you." Drake pulled out his cell phone. "I have a friend who is security for the hotel, and he owes me a favor. I can't promise anything, but maybe he can help us get into the surveillance room." A few hours later, Nolan and Drake entered the Crescent Moon Hotel through the back door. Drake's friend Marcus, a hunky security supervisor, guided them through the service to the surveillance room. "I can only give you 5 minutes," Marcus said nervously. "If I get caught, I'll lose my job." "Understood," Drake nodded. "We just need to confirm one thing." Marcus pulled up the surveillance feed from the top-floor restaurant. It's 2:55 p.m. and the private dining area is ready. A beautifully decorated table, flowers, candles, and obviously for a romantic date. At 2:58, Reed Mason appears in the frame, wearing an expensive suit and holding a bouquet of red roses. The waiter poured him champagne, and he seemed to relax with an expectant smile. 3:02. Talia walks into the private area. She took off her professional jacket from the morning, revealing a silk blouse underneath, and let her hair down. Reed stood up to greet her, giving her a hug and kiss that was clearly beyond the normal business relationship. Nolan felt a wave of vertigo, as if he'd been hit in the chest with a hammer. He forced himself to keep reading. Reed hands Talia the rose, which she accepts with obvious joy. They sat down, raised their glasses to each other, and talked. Reed then pulls a small box from his pocket and pushes it to the center of the table. Talia opens the box and covers her mouth in surprise before removing a sparkling bracelet from it. Reed helped her put it on, then kissed her wrist. "Enough," Nolan said with difficulty. "I've seen everything I need to know." After leaving the hotel, Nolan felt a strange calm descend. The shock and pain were still there, but covered by a calm determination. He drove home, ready to gather more information and evidence. Over the next few days, he systematically investigated Talia and Reed's relationship. He checked their social media activity and realized that Reed had been leaving subtle but obviously intimate comments under Talia's posts for months. He examined the shared credit card statements and found that Talia had recently made purchases at a number of high-end restaurants and bars he was unfamiliar with, usually in amounts sufficient for just one person. Through another friend of Drake's who works for a telecom company, he obtains Talia's phone records. Although this method is ethically dubious, Nolan couldn't care less about that now. For the past 2 months, she has been talking to a specific number unusually often, especially late at night. But the most decisive evidence came from a note he found in his home, hidden in the bottom of Talia's jewelry box. The note reads, "T. Miss spending every moment with you. Can't wait to start our new life in Vancouver. Love you, R." Each discovery pierced Nolan's heart like a knife. He begins to understand why Talia has been hesitant about the wedding lately, why she's become distant, and why she's beginning to express doubts about their future together. Not because of pressure, not because of fear, but because she had chosen a different path. On the 6th day, when Nolan had gathered all the evidence and was ready for confrontation, Talia finally contacted him. She sent a short text, "We need to talk. I'll be home at 8 p.m. Nolan replied, "Good." He knew it was going to be a tough conversation, but he was ready for it. Not as a victim, but as someone who knows the truth and has decided to take control of his own destiny. When Talia pushed open the door to her house at exactly 8 o'clock, Nolan was sitting in the living room, the evidence he'd collected: photographs, phone records, credit card bills, and the fateful note neatly arranged on the coffee table in front of him. "Nolan," she said with tension in her voice, "we need to talk about the wedding." "No," Nolan said calmly. "We need to talk about you and Reed Mason." Talia froze in place, her face turning instantly pale. Her gaze dropped to the evidence on the coffee table before looking into Nolan's eyes. "How do you?" "It doesn't matter," Nolan interrupted her. "What matters is the truth. How long have you had it?" Talia took a deep breath and her shoulders slumped slightly. 2 months. Why? That simple question seemed to hit her. Talia slowly walks to the other end of the couch and sits down, keeping her distance from Nolan. "I don't know how to explain it," she said eventually. "It started out as a working relationship. He often came to the hotel to hold events, and we grew to know each other well. And then, things change. Become what? Betrayal of a 5-year relationship? Give up everything we've built together." Nolan's voice remained calm, but with obvious pain. "It wasn't planned." Talia's eyes welled up with tears. "Reed made me feel seen and understood. I felt so alone when you were at sea. Even when you come back, there's always distance between us. Our lives have become so predictable. So this is about excitement, about escaping the ordinary." "Partly," she admits, "but it's also about feeling cherished. Reed has a genuine interest in my career and he understands my ambitions. And I don't understand?" Nolan felt a surge of anger. "I support you in every decision, am proud of you, and plan everything for our future. Isn't that enough?" "It's not just support, Nolan. It's the connection, it's the passion, it's the feeling that we're really together, not just living side by side." Talia wiped away a tear. "I know it sounds selfish." "Because it does." Nolan looked her straight in the eye. "You have a chance to be honest about how you feel and give us a chance to repair our relationship. But you chose to cheat and betray." Silence spread between them. Eventually, Talia asked, "What now?" "It's up to you," Nolan replied. "What do you want, Talia? Is it me or is it him?" Talia lowered her head, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm going to Vancouver with Reed. He's starting a new program there and wants me to come along. Despite being prepared, the answer was still like a knife to Nolan's heart. 5 years of love, a shared dream, a home built, all the plans and promises, all for naught. So be it. Nolan stood up. I hope you find what you're looking for. Nolan, I'm so sorry. Talia's tears finally flowed. I never thought it would end like this. So did I, he said calmly. But you made a choice. Now, I'm going to make my choice, too. That night, Talia packed up some essentials and left. She said she would schedule a time to pick up the rest of the items. Nolan stood in the empty house and felt the reality of a 5-year relationship coming to an abrupt end. He walked towards the balcony and looked out at the lights of the city in the distance. Pain, anger, a sense of betrayal, all the emotions churned through him. But over and above all this is a firm resolve. Nolan Fletcher will not let this betrayal go unpunished. He is not an impulsive person and does not resort to violence or illegal behavior. But he'll make Talia and Reed pay for their behavior, in his own way, at the right time. He took out his cell phone and deleted all the pictures with Talia. Then he began to make plans, not out of love, but out of a need for justice. Betrayal has its price, and soon they will all realize it. A month has passed. Nolan returns to the rig and immerses himself in his work, trying to numb the pain in his heart with exhaustion. Unlike his colleagues, he volunteered for extra shifts and extended time at sea. Standing on the edge of the platform late at night, looking out over the dark North Sea, he contemplated his elaborate plan for revenge. Nolan isn't one to get angry easily, but he's also not one to forget a betrayal. After 10 years in the oil industry, he learned the value of patience and precision. Just as drilling a well requires precise calculations and perfect timing, so will his revenge. Through Drake, he learns that Talia has officially resigned from the Crescent Moon Hotel and is preparing to move to Vancouver to live with Reed by the end of the month. Reed has begun developing a luxury condominium project in a high-end area there, and Talia will be responsible for marketing and event planning for the project. Everything looks perfect, but it won't last long. Nolan's program is divided into 3 phases. The first phase has begun, information gathering. Over the past 4 weeks, he has used his contacts and resources to delve into Reed Mason's business and personal life. As a senior technician in the oil industry, Nolan knew many people in the business world, including bankers, lawyers, and investors. Through these connections, he gradually pieced together what Reed was really like. Reed Mason, a seemingly successful real estate developer, is actually on the verge of financial crisis. His first few projects, while glamorous on the surface, had serious quality issues that led to several undisclosed legal disputes. What's more, his new Vancouver project relies heavily on one key investor, Gregory Patel, a businessman with extensive investments in the oil and gas industry who happens to be Nolan's former chief. The second stage is preparation. Nolan took 2 days off from the platform and flew to Calgary to meet with Gregory. They had dinner at an upscale steakhouse to discuss market dynamics and industry trends. It wasn't until dessert was served that Nolan naturally steered the conversation toward Reed Mason. Speaking of which, don't you have an investment in a development in Vancouver? The Reed Mason one. Nolan asked casually, as if it were just casual conversation. Gregory raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Coincidence, Nolan smiled. I know him. In fact, I'd like to warn you to be careful with this investment. Why do you say that? Gregory puts down his fork and his expression turns serious. Nolan pulled out the prepared folder. This is some information on his past projects, including undisclosed legal disputes and financial issues. I think you should know this before you put more money into it. Gregory flipped through the documents, his expression growing stony. Is all of this true? Every single one of them has been verified, Nolan nodded. Of course, you can do some more investigating on your own. Why are you telling me this? Gregory asked suspiciously. Nolan had long been ready to answer. Because you're a senior I respect, and I don't want to see you suffer. Besides, the oil industry is tough enough as it is. We should support each other. As he left the restaurant, Gregory clasped Nolan's hand. Thanks for the warning. I'll reevaluate this investment. The first piece has fallen. Next, Nolan contacted another key person, Vanessa Reed, Director of Human Resources at Crescent Moon Hotel Group. As an influential customer representative in the industry, Nolan has resolved technical issues for hotels on numerous occasions and has built a strong relationship with management. Vanessa, it's great to hear your voice again, Nolan said on the phone. I know this is a bit of a strange request, but it's important to me. Yes, Nolan. Vanessa's tone was friendly and curious. I'd like to get the specifics of Talia Miller's departure. The caller was silent for a moment. It's personnel confidentiality, you know. I understand, Nolan said softly. But you also know about my relationship with her and what happened. I just need some closure to help me move forward. There was another moment of silence. Then Vanessa sighed. Only public information can be told. She handed in her resignation, but we're actually already considering terminating her contract. Why? Nolan feigned surprise. In recent months, her performance at work has been much worse. Several important clients complained about her lack of concentration and missing key details. More importantly, we have reason to believe that she violated the code of ethics by developing personal relationships with clients. Reed Mason. Nolan said. You got it. There was sympathy in Vanessa's voice. I'm so sorry, Nolan. If it makes you feel any better, her departure is not good for professional reputation. The hotel industry is small and word travels fast. Thank you for your candor, Vanessa. After hanging up the phone, Nolan felt a twinge of satisfaction. The second piece is also in place. Now it's time to execute the third phase of the plan, the final blow. Upon returning to Edmonton from Calgary, Nolan arranges a meeting with Lauren Blake, one of the area's most prominent investigative journalists. She is known for exposing business fraud and unethical behavior and has a popular column and podcast. They met at a quiet cafe. Lauren recognized Nolan right away after all. News of a canceled wedding travels fast in social circles, especially when it involves someone like Talia, who's famous in the event planning industry. So, Mr. Fletcher, Lauren went straight to the point. You said you had an important story to tell me? Yes. Nolan pushed over a flash drive. About Reed Mason and his real estate project. I'm sure you'll find it interesting. Lauren raises an eyebrow. Is this personal? Because I don't engage in private vengeance. Not exactly, Nolan said honestly. I'm not going to deny that I have personal motives. However, the information does have a public interest. Reed's project has safety issues that could potentially jeopardize future residents. In addition, his business practices involve defrauding investors. Lauren hesitated, then took the flash drive. I'll take a look at the contents and conduct an independent investigation. If the information is true and newsworthy, I will consider reporting it. But I will not be a tool for personal revenge. Fair and reasonable, Nolan nodded. All I ask is that the facts be fairly reported. Leaving the cafe, Nolan knew the last piece was in place. Now, he just had to wait for things to develop naturally. 2 weeks later, Nolan was on the rig when he got a text from Drake. It's on. Later that evening, Lauren Blake published an explosive article detailing Reed Mason's business misconduct, including the use of inferior materials, bribery of inspectors, and concealment of financial risks from investors. The article cites several anonymous sources, including former employees and investors, while also making some key documents public. While the article doesn't mention Talia directly, it does mention Reed's use of personal relationships with high-end hotels to acquire clients and investors. The day after the article was published, Gregory Patel publicly announced that he was withdrawing his entire investment in Reed's Vancouver project and that he would pursue legal recourse for any losses that may have resulted from his previous investment. Other investors quickly followed suit, leading to a break in the project's financial chain. On the third day, the Crescent Moon Hotel Group issued a statement severing all business relationships with Reed Mason and his company and emphasizing that they do not tolerate professional misconduct of any kind. The statement specifically mentioned that they had informed their partners in Vancouver of the situation, effectively cutting off Talia's potential career opportunities there. Within a week, Reed's empire began to crumble. His company's stock price plummeted, several projects under construction were ordered shut down for investigation, and several clients filed lawsuits. The media swarmed like sharks, smelling blood, and unearthed more scandals. In the midst of this storm, Nolan stays silent, calmly observing from a rig far away in the North Sea. He was not directly involved in subsequent developments and has not made any public comments. His vengeance needs no words. The facts speak for themselves. Drake continued to update the situation. Reed started dumping on subordinates and partners. He claims to be a victim of misinformation. A few days later came another message. Talia is caught in the middle. Reed pushed her away in front of a reporter, saying she was just a regular employee of the company. She looks totally shocked. Nolan did not respond to those messages. He felt neither the joy of victory nor the urge to sympathize. All he felt was a strange emptiness, as if some part of his heart had frozen forever. At the end of his 45-day shift on the rig, Nolan returned to Edmonton. His house remained empty, most of Talia's belongings having been removed, leaving only those pieces of furniture and decorations that the two had purchased together. Walking into the master bedroom, he noticed that the scent of her perfume had dissipated, replaced by dust and silence. I had just put my bags down when the doorbell rang. Through the window, he saw Talia standing in the doorway, much thinner than she had been a month ago, with noticeable dark circles under her eyes. Nolan took a deep breath and walked toward the door. He wasn't sure he was ready to face her, but he knew the moment would come sooner or later. "Nolan," Talia whispered as he opened the door. "Thank you for seeing me." "Yes." His tone was cold and calm. Talia looked a little wary. "Can I come in?" He sidled up to let her in, but didn't guide her to the living room to sit down. They just stood in the foyer, facing each other awkwardly. "Your plan." Talia finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Was it your doing? Articles, investment withdrawals, all that." Nolan looked her straight in the eye. "Why do you think that?" "Because the timing is so coincidental. Because I know your contacts in the oil industry. Because—" She paused and bit her lip. "Because I know when you decide to do something, you always succeed." "Is it important?" Nolan asked rhetorically. "Facts are facts, no matter who reveals them." Reed defrauded his investors and customers. "He lied to me too." Talia's eyes glistened with tears. "All those promises about us starting a new life in Vancouver were lies. As soon as things got difficult, he immediately pushed me away, saying I was just a regular employee and even implying that I was the one who leaked company information." Nolan felt a mixture of emotions come over him. Part of him was satisfied by Talia's pain, which was the goal of his plan, but another part of him, the one who had loved her for 5 years, felt a dull ache. "So what now?" he asked, his voice no longer so cold and hard. "What are you here for?" Talia took a deep breath as the tears finally fell. "I screwed up everything, Nolan. I've lost my job, my reputation, and now even my chances in Vancouver. No hotel would hire me because they all heard about me and Reed." She paused and wiped away her tears. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to start over. I don't know what to do." Nolan felt a familiar urge to comfort her, to protect her, but he quickly suppressed the feeling. She made a choice, and choices always have consequences. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Talia." He confessed. "If you're here for sympathy, you should go to your mom or friends." "I don't have any friends left," she laughed bitterly. "They're all on your side. As for my mom, she's so disappointed she barely speaks to me." "What about Reed? Your new love?" Talia shook her head and laughed mockingly. "Of course not. When the going got tough, he immediately abandoned me. The last time we met, he blamed me for his failure, saying he wouldn't have risked so much if he hadn't been trying to satisfy my need for a life of luxury." As much as Nolan doesn't want to admit it, this outcome is exactly what he expected. Reed has demonstrated opportunistic qualities from the beginning and certainly preserves himself in times of crisis. "What's your plan?" Nolan asked, trying to keep a neutral tone. "I don't know," Talia said honestly. "Maybe leave the city and start over. Go back to college for further study. Or change careers altogether." She paused and forced a smile. "I just wanted to tell you that I understand your pain. The things I do to you. I now know firsthand what it feels like to be betrayed." The comment sent a wave through Nolan. He carried out his revenge not only to punish her, but also in the hope that she would truly understand the damage her actions had caused. "It now appears that this goal has been achieved. I hope you learned something from this," he said, his voice low. "Not just about what it feels like to be betrayed, but what it means to make a commitment." Talia nodded, tears welling up again. "I'm so sorry, Nolan. I know it's pointless, but I'm really sorry." Silence spread between them. Eventually, Nolan walked towards the door and opened it gently. "I want you to start over, Talia. Really, but not with me." Talia nodded understandingly and walked slowly towards the door. Before leaving, She stopped and took a small box out of her pocket. The engagement ring, she whispered. It should come back to you. Nolan took the box and felt the weight of it, not only physically, but also emotionally. He didn't open it, just nodded. Bye, Nolan. Talia gave him one last look and left. When the door closed, Nolan stood still for a long time, staring at the ring box in his hand. His plan for revenge succeeds, even beyond expectations. Reed's career is ruined, or at least not recoverable in the short term. Talia has lost her job and reputation, been abandoned, and experienced the pain of betrayal. But the taste of victory was more bitter than he had expected. For the next few weeks, Edmonton was immersed in a particularly cold winter. Temperatures dropped to -30 degrees and thick snow covered the entire city. Nolan barricaded himself in his house and politely declined invitations to parties from friends, including Drake's kind offer. He began to rethink his life and his future. The house now seemed too big and empty, filled with memories of his and Talia's life together. Maybe it's time to sell it, move somewhere else, or even consider leaving the city. That night, he receives an unexpected text message from Elaine, Talia's mother. Nolan, can I talk to you? Tea time tomorrow. He hesitated for a moment, then replied, Okay, see you at the usual place. The next afternoon, Nolan went to the little tea house they frequented. Elaine was already there waiting with 2 steaming cups of tea in front of her. Despite the fact that only a few months had passed, she looked much older, the wrinkles around her eyes more pronounced. Thank you for wanting to see me, she said as Nolan sat down. How have you been? It's okay, Nolan replied briefly. How about you? Elaine laughed bitterly. How good can it be? Watching my daughter destroy her life, and there's nothing I can do about it. Talia is an adult, and she made her own choices. Yeah, bad choice. Elaine shook her head, but she's paying the price. She hesitated, then looked Nolan straight in the eye. Did you know she moved back into my house? Nolan shook his head. He hadn't contacted Talia since that day's conversation in front of his house, nor had he inquired about her through mutual friends. She can't get a job, Elaine continued, at least not in this industry. She's running out of savings, so she's moving back in for the time being. She is now working part-time at a coffee shop while applying to go back to college for a master's degree in business management. Sounds like a good way to start over, Nolan commented, unsure why Elaine was telling him this. Yeah, maybe. Elaine sighed and tapped her fingers on her teacup. Nolan, I'm not going to pretend to understand what happened between you and you. Talia made a serious mistake and hurt you, and I completely understand your anger. But Nolan could sense there were words behind it. But does revenge really make you feel better? The direct question surprised Nolan a bit. He hadn't expected Elaine to mention revenge so bluntly. I don't know what you're referring to, he said, trying to keep a neutral expression. Elaine smiled slightly, but there was sadness in her smile. Nolan, I've known you for 5 years. You're the most meticulous, planning person I've ever met. The timing of that article and subsequent events was too perfect to be a coincidence. Nolan didn't deny it or admit it. He just took a sip of his tea and waited for her to continue. I'm not here to blame you, Elaine said. In fact, in a way, I understand how you feel. Being betrayed is a terrible experience. But my concern is, what good does this revenge do you? Did it mend your heart? The question goes straight to Nolan's deepest doubts. Revenge did bring him a certain satisfaction, but that feeling was quickly replaced by emptiness. Each night, as he lay alone in the bed he had once shared, the taste of victory became more and more bitter. No, he finally admitted, his voice low, it doesn't. But it's not about feeling better, it's about justice. On behavior and consequences. Elaine nodded understandingly. Fair point. But one thing I've learned as someone who has lived nearly 60 years is that revenge rarely brings true peace. It may provide fleeting satisfaction, but it won't heal the wound. And what can? Nolan couldn't help but ask. Time. Forgive. Not for them, but for yourself. The ability to look forward. Elaine said softly. I'm not suggesting you go back to Talia. That ship has sailed away. But I hope you find peace, Nolan. You deserve happiness. They finished their tea in silence. As she was saying goodbye, Elaine gently hugged Nolan. No matter what, you'll always be part of my family, she said. And if you need anything, I'm always here. Nolan thanked her and then walked home alone, pondering her words. Maybe she's right. Maybe revenge isn't the path to peace. But it seems too late to do such thinking. It's happened, and it can't be undone. Another week later, Nolan was at home organizing his belongings and preparing to list his house for sale when a call came in from Drake. "Did you watch the news?" Drake sounded a little nervous. "No." "What?" "Reed Mason killed himself in his apartment this morning." Nolan felt a wave of vertigo and had to sit down. "What?" "Police found him in the garage with the engine on. Left a suicide note admitting to all charges, saying he couldn't face the defeat and shame." The news hit Nolan like a hammer. His plan for revenge never included such an outcome. He wants Reed to pay the price, to lose his career and reputation, but not his life. "Does Talia know?" he asked mechanically. "I guess I should know. It's been on the news," Drake replied, then hesitated. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Nolan said honestly. "I'll need some time to digest the news." After hanging up, Nolan sat there for a long time, his thoughts reeling. He never thought his actions would lead to the death of a person, no matter what that person had done. The realization left him with a deep sense of fear and guilt. It was late in the evening when his doorbell rang. Opening the door, he was surprised to find it was Talia standing there, eyes red and swollen, obviously having cried. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Nolan stepped aside to let her in. This time, he guided her to the living room and sat down, pouring her a glass of water. "Have you heard?" Talia asked, her voice hoarse. "Yeah," Nolan replied. "Drake told me." "Is this part of your plan?" She looked him straight in the eye, and there was no accusation in her tone, only exhaustion and confusion. "No, of course not," Nolan replied immediately, shocked that she would think that. "I never wished him dead. I just want to hold him accountable for his behavior." Talia nodded as if accepting the answer. "I thought so. In any case, it's not your fault. Reed made his choice, as we all do." They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. "I feel strange," Talia finally spoke. "I should have hated him for his deception, for the way he abandoned me. But hearing the news that he's dead, all I feel is sadness and emptiness." Nolan understands that feeling. He has no personal hatred for Reed. He just sees him as a betrayer who needs to be punished. Now, learning that he had paid the ultimate price felt like neither victory nor defeat, just a deep emptiness. "People have complex emotions," he said softly, "even for those who hurt us." Talia looked at him with sad understanding in her eyes. "Just like I feel for you. I betrayed you. I hurt you, but I never stopped caring about you. Even when I was with Reed, deep down I knew it was wrong." Nolan doesn't know how to respond to this confession. Part of him wanted to accept it as the basis for some sort of reconciliation, but the other part reminded him that he'd already been tricked by that emotion once. "Why are you here today?" he finally asked. Talia took a deep breath. "I wanted to make sure you were okay. I know that Reed's death will have an impact on you, regardless of your relationship. And," she paused, "I think you should know I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to make up for my mistakes, even though I know some things can't be fixed." Nolan nodded, somehow grateful for her honesty. "I want you to succeed, Talia." "Really?" As she got up to leave, an unexpected question came out of Nolan's mouth. "Did you ever really love me?" Talia stopped and turned to face him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, Nolan. Deeper than I ever admitted. That's the saddest part. I've abandoned real love to chase a fantasy." After she left, Nolan stood at the window and watched her figure disappear into the dusk streets. He felt a strange relief, as if some long-pressed weight had been gently lifted from his heart. 2 months later, Nolan sat in his attorney's office and signed the final sale documents for the house. He decided to leave Edmonton and accepted a position on a new drilling project in the Arctic Circle, a completely land-based job with a management role, exactly the kind of career move he had always planned. Returning for the last time to the home that was once filled with hopes and dreams, the now empty rooms echoed with the sound of his footsteps. There are memories around every corner, some warm, some painful. He paused in the master bedroom, recalling how he had once planned his future here, how he had described to Talia how they would grow old and fill the space to create a home. Those dreams had been shattered, but from the fragments, he began to rebuild himself. No longer the gullible Nolan, or the cold, vengeful Nolan, but a more mature, wiser man, one who understands the true cost of love and betrayal. Drake was waiting for him at the gate to help him get the last few boxes of his belongings into the truck. Ready to move on to a new life? Drake asked, closing the truck door. I think so, Nolan replied, taking one last look at the house. Although I'm not sure what that would look like. Who knows? Drake patted him on the shoulder. But that's what life is all about, isn't it? Moving forward, no matter what happens. Nolan smiles and nods. He had decided not to let the shadows of the past define his future. Revenge brings him not satisfaction, but the realization of the dark side within himself. He didn't want to be that person, someone who inflicted pain because of pain. On the highway out of Edmonton, Nolan recalled Elaine's words. Revenge rarely brings true peace. She's right. True peace comes from letting go, from choosing not to let betrayal define your entire life. As for Talia, he'd heard she'd started college classes and was trying to rebuild her life. He sincerely hoped she would succeed. Not because he forgave her that hurt was too deep to fully heal, but because he understood that everyone has the right to make mistakes and to start over. Reed's death remains a hard lesson, a reminder to all that the ripple effects of action can sometimes exceed expectations. Nolan will always live with this realization, letting it guide his future decisions and actions. As the lights of the city grew smaller in the rearview mirror, Nolan felt a long-lost peace descend. Betrayal has its price, there is no doubt about it. But revenge has its price, sometimes even higher. True wisdom lies not in how to make others pay, but in how to avoid being part of that price. Nolan Fletcher has finally gotten the message, though the lesson was hard-won. On the long road to the north, he chooses to forgive not for Talia or Reed, but for himself. For only then would he be truly free to begin a new journey, no longer bound by the shadows of the past. And that, perhaps, is the most important realization of all. In the shadow of betrayal, one can still find the courage to move forward. In the ashes of pain, one can still rebuild one's life. This is a story of loss, but it is also a story of rebirth. Ultimately, the true cost of betrayal is not what someone else pays, but how we ourselves choose to respond, whether to wallow in hatred and vengeance, or to find the strength to move on. For Nolan, that choice now becomes clear. Traveling north to meet the new horizon, he could finally say, the price of betrayal had been paid. Now it's time to start a whole new chapter. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.